My own parents disowned me, leaving me for dead in the streets. I was sleeping in a freezing car, clutching my sick, feverish daughter, convinced my life was over. But then a black Bentley rolled up in the storm, carrying a ghost from my past, and everything changed. That night, the fluorescent light above the conference table buzzed like a dying insect. It was the only sound in that empty, sterile room. All I could hear was the scratch of my own pen. I sat there, alone, in a rented office space that reeked of industrial carpet cleaner and the bitter smell of failure. In front of me lay the final, damning page, the dissolution of Sentinel Vault Technologies. My company, my heart, 5 years of blood, sweat, and tears, my equity baby. My hand was shaking, but I forced the pen to move, to scrawl my name across the line. Ariana Sanchez. The ink looked too black, too final, against the stark white paper. I stared at the words printed above, voluntary dissolution. It felt less like a legal filing and more like a death certificate I was being forced to sign for myself. I had seen too many death certificates in the last 6 months, but this one felt heavier, more absolute. I twisted the platinum band on my left hand, my wedding ring. It spun freely, loose on a knuckle that had become sharp and prominent. I'd lost at least 15 pounds since the subpoenas first arrived. I'd lost everything else, too. Just 3 months ago, it felt like a different lifetime, like I was watching a movie about a different person entirely. 3 months ago, I was Ariana Sanchez. The Redwood Valley Tech Chronicle had crowned me the conscience of the code. I was the star CEO of Sentinel Vault, living proof you could build a 9-figure cybersecurity firm without auctioning off your soul. Memories came in sharp, painful bursts, like broken glass flashing in the sun. I remember the view from my corner office, floor-to-ceiling glass, overlooking the green, rolling hills of Redwood Valley, that ambitious city just north of San Francisco's fog line. I remembered the satisfying weight of the Crystal Award for Most Ethical Innovator at the annual gala. I remember the photo shoot for the cover of Valley Investor magazine. My smile wide and genuine, my blazer a sharp, confident cobalt blue. The headline screaming, "The new face of ethical tech." I remembered home. Not this empty, sterile room, but our house. A stunning modern build of warm wood and sweeping glass, always filled with light and, until recently, laughter. My husband, Mark, grilling on the expansive cedar deck, his smile easy and proud back then. And Lena, my 7-year-old Lena, her dark curls bouncing as she ran through the sprinklers on the immaculate lawn, squealing with a joy so pure and uncomplicated it physically hurt to remember it now. I'd built Sentinel Vault on a simple, almost naive premise. Ethics were a competitive advantage, not a liability. In a world of dirty hacks, state-sponsored data theft, and morally bankrupt code brokers, we were the clean hands. We were the good guys. We refused the gray contracts, the ones that blurred the line between national security and domestic surveillance. We turned down multi-million-dollar deals from regimes and corporations I couldn't, in good conscience, explain to Lena. I told my investors, my staff, and myself that integrity was the ultimate encryption. We were building something that would last because it was good. I was such a fool. I blinked hard, and the glass office vanished. The buzzing flicker of the fluorescent light yanked me back to the present, back to the beige, windowless walls of this rented purgatory. The last of the office furniture had been liquidated to pay a fraction of our legal bills. The server racks in the next room stood dark, cavernous wounds where our digital heart used to be. Cardboard boxes, sagging with financial records, old keyboards, and cheap promotional coffee mugs lined the hallway, waiting for a liquidator who would pay pennies on the dollar for the scraps of our legacy. The proud, brushed aluminum logo of Sentinel Vault, a stylized shield I'd sketched on a cocktail napkin 5 years ago, was gone from the lobby wall. Only a faint, dusty outline remained, a perfect ghost of what we once were. My laptop, one of the few pieces of tech I still personally owned, pinged with a hollow sound. I opened the email. It was from our last seed investor, the one who believed in me when all I had was a PowerPoint deck and a theory. The subject line read, "Refunding withdrawal." The body said, Ariana, I am truly sorry. We cannot expose the fund to any more associated risk or legal fallout. We are officially rescinding our final bridge offer. Best of luck. Best of luck. The signature was automated. He didn't even have the courage to type his own name at the bottom of my company's obituary. I closed the laptop screen with quiet finality. That was it. The last nail. The plug had been pulled. It started so quietly. That was the truly insidious part. It didn't begin with a crash, but with a whisper. A polite, sharply dressed man with dead eyes handed me a thick manila envelope in the lobby of our beautiful building. A subpoena. Sentinel Vault Technologies was being sued by Helix Fortress Labs, our main competitor. The irony was bitter enough to make me gag. They were the ones known for cutting corners, for poaching engineers, for operating in those lucrative gray areas I so smugly avoided. The accusations, systematic financial fraud, and the theft of their core encryption algorithm. I actually laughed when I first read it in my lawyer's office. Ethical code, my entire brand, my philosophy, was built on the exact opposite. I would sooner have burned the building to the ground. Then came the emergency shareholder meeting. I walked in confident, my legal team flanking me, my presentation queued up, ready to dismiss this as a frivolous corporate shakedown. A desperate move by a competitor we were beating. Then their lawyers started their presentation. They showed slides, emails supposedly from my encrypted server, emails I had never written, had never even seen, discussing the acquisition and integration of Helix's core tech. Server logs meticulously fabricated, showing unauthorized access originating from our IP addresses, masked to look like routine maintenance. Offshore wire transfers to anonymous shell corporations, signed with a forgery of my digital signature so perfect it made my stomach turn cold. I sat there at the head of the table, frozen. This wasn't just a lawsuit. It was an execution. Someone had framed us. Framed me with a level of sophistication that was terrifying. It was a digital assassination carried out with surgical precision. I was a cybersecurity expert, and I had never even seen a blade. The media didn't wait for a verdict. The feeding frenzy was immediate and brutal. The conscience of the code was a fraud. My magazine covers were replaced with unflattering courthouse photos, my face pale and strained, my eyes wide with a shock they interpreted as guilt. Headlines screamed, from cyber hero to tech thief. The fall of Saint Ariana Sanchez. The biggest lie in Redwood Valley. My staff, the brilliant, loyal engineers I had poached from Giants and Minter myself, started to leave. First in trickles, then a flood. They had families to feed, mortgages to pay, their own reputations to protect. They couldn't afford to be associated with me. I didn't blame them. The corporate collapse was public, a spectacular bonfire for the whole industry to watch. But the personal one was silent, and in many ways so much worse. Mark changed. The easy, proud smile vanished, replaced by a permanent, pinched look of resentment and embarrassment. He had loved being the husband of the next big thing in tech. He did not, it turned out, enjoy being the husband of the cautionary tale. You just had to be so damn pure, didn't you? He spat one night after Lena was asleep on his third expensive whiskey. The smell of it was thick and sour in our pristine kitchen. You pushed too hard, grew too fast. You made enemies. Ariana, you were too arrogant to see it. You brought this on us. The fights became constant. Not about the accusations. He seemed to have already convicted me in his own mind. But about the consequences. The money. The whispers at the country club. The loss of our social standing. He accused me of ruining his name, his life, by association. Then the court ruled. We lost. Helix Fortress Labs won. The fabricated evidence, impossible to disprove in the accelerated time frame of an injunction, held. The judgment was astronomical. A figure clearly designed to kill the company and scatter its bones. Sentinel Vault was ordered to pay damages that vaporized our remaining capital, our patents, and then some. The final blow came swiftly. Pending the inevitable appeals that I could no longer afford and the dozens of shareholder lawsuits now piling up like vultures, a judge ordered all my personal assets frozen. The house, the savings, Lena's college fund. Everything. I stared at the signed dissolution paper on the cheap laminate table. The flickering light was giving me a pounding migraine. I had maybe $50 in cash in my wallet, scavenged from the bottom of an old purse. Mark had taken his designer suitcases and gone to his parents' house 2 weeks ago to give us space. He meant to detach himself from the wreckage before it sank. My phone buzzed on the table, a harsh vibration against the wood. It wasn't Mark. It wasn't my lawyer. It was my mother. My heart gave a stupid, desperate leap. My parents, Elliot and Diane Carter. Old money, finance titans from the East Coast. They disapproved of my risky tech venture and my choice to marry a man they considered newly adequate. But they were still my family. Maybe they had seen the final news. Maybe they were calling to tell me to come home, that they would fix this. I fumbled for the phone and opened the text. It was only 3 words. "We're done, Ariana." I read it again and again. Not "we're done with this mess." Just "we're done." My fingers, clumsy and numb, typed back a single pathetic query. "Mom, what does this mean?" The reply was instant. It was no longer from my mother. It was from the matriarch of the Carter dynasty, a woman who valued legacy above all else. The Carter family does not tolerate reputation ruin. Do not come home. The pen slipped from my nervous fingers, rolling off the table and hitting the cheap, stained carpet with a dull thud. The buzzing of the fluorescent light seemed to get louder, angrier, filling my head, drowning out the sound of my own breathing. I was Ariana Sanchez, 34 years old, and I had just signed my own death certificate. The text from my mother was a final shove into an abyss I was already falling into. The days that followed were a blur of cold panic and logistical humiliation. I was clinging to our beautiful, light-filled house, but it was no longer a home. It was just a set, the backdrop for a life that had been canceled. Red and pink notices appeared on our reinforced glass front door, one after another, like malignant new growths. The bank was no longer threatening foreclosure. It was scheduling it. The water was cut off 2 days after I signed the dissolution papers. The power held on for another 24 hours. And then our modern marvel of architecture went dark and silent, lit only by the California sun that now felt accusatory, exposing the dust settling on our expensive, useless furniture. Mark returned, but not for me. He showed up with an aggressive, smiling realtor who talked about distressed assets and a quick sale to minimize the bleeding. "Mark, we can fight this." I pleaded with him in the kitchen, which still smelled faintly of the artisanal coffee we could no longer afford. "The judgment is based on fraud. I can appeal. I just need time. Time, Ariana, look at this." He snatched a blood-red envelope from the marble countertop. "We don't have time. We have an auction date. I'm not letting your mess drag my credit and my future into the negative. We sell now whatever we can get. We cut our losses." "Our losses?" "Mark, this is our home. This is where Lena learned to walk." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I once found charming, but now recognized as a precursor to him running away. "It's just a house, Ariana. And frankly, it's a house that is tainted. We're tainted. I'm filing for a legal separation." The words hit me harder than the court judgment. "What? It's for the best. For Lena," he said, and the use of our daughter's name as a shield made me physically sick. "This scandal, I can't have her dragged through this." My parents agree. They think Lena should come stay with them for a while in Connecticut, just until this blows over. It's stable there. Clean. I stared at him. The man I had married, the man who had held my hand in the delivery room, was suggesting I send my daughter 3,000 miles away to protect her from me. "No," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Absolutely not. She stays with me." "With you where, Ariana?" He sneered, his fear making him cruel. "In this empty, foreclosed box? In a motel? I'm trying to protect my daughter. She's my daughter, too. And look what a great job you're doing. You're toxic, Ariana. The name Sanchez is mud, and you've splattered it all over me and all over her. I'm trying to salvage one good thing from this wreckage, and you are too proud to see it." He left that night, his designer suitcases rolling quietly over the expensive hardwood floors. The next day, the bank sent the final notice. We had 72 hours. I was out of options. The $50 was gone. My credit cards were declined. My friends in the industry were ghosts. I had nothing except them. My parents, Elliot and Diane Carter. The thought of calling them, of begging, was like swallowing acid. But then I looked at Lena, who was drawing on the back of a past-due electricity bill with a red crayon, humming to herself, oblivious to the fact that her world was ending. I could be proud, or I could be a mother. I cannot be both. I packed Lena's favorite stuffed rabbit, put her in her car seat, and the one asset Mark had left me, the old, paid-off SUV he found too embarrassing to drive, and I drove. Northgate Hills is not just a neighborhood. It's a fortress. A collection of estates perched high above Redwood Valley, deliberately isolated from the new money tech hubs below. You cannot get in by accident. Wrought iron gates, ancient and menacing, guard every driveway. The houses aren't houses. They're monuments to old power, built of stone and ivy and generational wealth. I pulled the SUV up to the intercom at my parents' gate. Carter Sterling Holdings wasn't just a name. It was a dynasty in the world of private equity and hostile takeovers. My father, Elliot, had built it from his father's already considerable fortune. I pressed the button. It's me. It's Ariana. A long silence. Then the heavy buzz of the gate swinging open. It felt less like an invitation and more like an insect being allowed into a spider's web. I parked the dusty SUV, a stark, pathetic contrast to the gleaming black Bentley in the circular drive, and took Lena's hand. We walked up the massive stone steps, past marble statues of Greek gods I had never understood. The front door was oak, thick enough to stop a bullet, and it opened before I could knock. A housekeeper I didn't recognize, new and stern, simply nodded and stepped aside, letting the cold air of the house wash over us. The foyer was a cathedral of silence and polished marble. The air smelled of old wood, lemon oil, and money so old it had turned bitter. "They are in the sitting room," the housekeeper murmured, then vanished. I led Lena down the hall. The sitting room was my father's domain, paneled in dark mahogany, dominated by a fireplace large enough to stand in, and filled with furniture that was priceless and profoundly uncomfortable. Elliot Carter was exactly where I knew he would be, sitting in his high-backed, leather-winged chair, a 17th century chessboard on the table beside him. The television, a massive screen disguised as an oil painting, was on. A financial news anchor was gleefully dissecting the final collapse of Sentinel Vault, complete with that same awful courthouse photo of me. My father, holding a black onyx bishop, didn't look at me. He waited until the anchor said my name. Then he aimed the remote, and the screen went black. The sudden silence was deafening. "So," he said, his voice dry as old paper. He placed the bishop on the board. "The prodigal daughter returns. Not with fanfare, it seems, but with the stench of failure." "Hello, father," I said, my voice tight. Lena hid behind my leg, clutching her rabbit. My mother, Diane Carter, was perched on a silk-covered chaise lounge near the window, pretending to read a book. She was perfectly coiffed, her jewelry immaculate, her face a smooth, unreadable mask of expensive skincare. She didn't look up. "Ariana," she said, a cool acknowledgement of my presence in her air. "I need help," I said, swallowing the bile of my pride. There was no point in pretending. "Sentinel is gone. The house is in foreclosure. Mark is gone. They've frozen everything. I'm bankrupt. I'm being slandered. And I need to hire a lawyer to appeal. I need a loan, just a temporary loan, to rent a small apartment for me and Lena, and to retain counsel." Elliot finally turned his head. His eyes, the same gray as a winter sky, swept over me, noting my loose clothes, my unwashed hair, my cheap, worn-out shoes. His gaze was an appraisal, and he found me worthless. "Loan?" he repeated, as if tasting a foreign, disgusting word. "Carter Sterling Holdings does not rescue media trash. We divest. We cut the infection before it spreads. You, Ariana, are a contagion." He stood up, his tall, thin frame radiating a chilling authority. "You have dragged the Carter name through the filth. Your little Silicon Valley fantasy has made us a public embarrassment. And now you come here with your hand out, wanting to use our good name as a life raft, the same name you refused to use when you got married. My company was framed. I shot back, my voice rising, trembling. This is not about my pride. This is about your granddaughter. Look at her. She has nowhere to sleep tonight. At the mention of Lena, Diane finally stirred. She turned her head, and her gaze fell on Lena. For a moment, her mask wavered. She gave a tight, thin-lipped smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then she looked away, out the window at her perfect, manicured gardens. Children shouldn't be raised around scandal, she said, her voice light, conversational, as if discussing the weather. It leaves a stain. Perhaps, Ariana, you should consider what is truly best for her. Letting a more stable family raise her. Someone who can provide for her. The blood drained from my face. It was Mart's words again, but colder, sharper, coming from my own mother. She wasn't suggesting a temporary stay. She was suggesting I give up my child. How can you say that? I whispered, my whole body shaking now. Not from fear, but from a rage so profound it choked me. I built that company from nothing. I worked nights. I slept on the floor of the office. I did everything right. I refused those dirty deals, Father. The same kind of aggressive deals you always encouraged. I refused to be like you. And there is your lesson. Elliot snapped, his voice a whip. You were not like me. You were weak. You believed ethics were a business model. Ethics are a luxury, Ariana, one you clearly could not afford. I told you to come into the firm. I told you this tech fantasy was a fool's game. You didn't listen. This accident is the price of your arrogance. He walked to a small antique desk, unlocked a drawer, and took out a gold money clip. He peeled off a few bills. It was a thick wad, but I could tell from a glance it wasn't enough for a lawyer. It wasn't even enough for a first and last month's rent. It was enough for a few weeks in a cheap motel. He tossed the cash onto the polished surface of a chessboard. The bills scattered, landing on the ivory and onyx pieces. It was a gesture of profound, theatrical contempt. Charity for the pathetic. This, he said, is your severance. A payment for silence. As of this moment, as far as the public, our partners, and our world are concerned, Elliot and Diane Carter do not have a daughter named Ariana. We have already instructed our press secretary. You are no longer part of this family. The finality of it hung in the air, colder than the marble floor. I looked at the money, then at my father's merciless face, then at my mother's turned, elegant back. They were, in this moment, complete strangers. Monsters. My hands were shaking, but I walked forward. I didn't look at him. I looked at the money. I needed it. Not for me. For Lena. For milk. For gas. For one more night of safety. With a humiliation that burned like fire, I gathered the crumpled bills. I turned without a word, pulling Lena close to my side. Her hand felt so small and warm in mine. As we walked out of the vast, cold room, Lena, in her 7-year-old innocence, turned and piped up, her little voice echoing in the mahogany silence. Bye-bye, Grandma. Bye-bye, Grandpa. I stopped, my back to them, my eyes squeezed shut. I waited for one of them to say something, to call her name, to say goodbye. There was only silence. I opened my eyes and walked out. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind us. The sound was as sharp and final as a guillotine, severing the last thread of the bloodline. The wad of cash my father threw on the chessboard was thick with his contempt, but it was still cash. It felt greasy in my hand, a physical manifestation of my failure. I used it. I hated myself, but I used it. I sold what little I had left. My wedding ring, the one that now spun so loosely on my finger, went to a pawn shop for a fraction of its worth. The jeweler's loop in the man's, I felt like a judgment. I sold the designer clothes Mark had left behind in his haste to disconnect from me. I sold my good laptop, the powerful machine I had used to build my company, and bought a cheap refurbished one with the cash. It was enough. It bought us 3 weeks at the Starlight Motel, a long, low building of painted cinder block and neon despair, squatting by the freeway. The sign was missing the S, so, at night, it just read Starlight Motel. It had a door that locked, a shower that produced lukewarm water if you were patient, and a window that looked out onto an ocean of asphalt. For Lena, it was a hotel adventure. She loved the tiny, bar-sized soaps and the fact that we could eat cereal for dinner on the beds. For me, it was a slow-motion countdown to 0. Mark found me there. He didn't come to reconcile. He came with an envelope. The motel manager, a man with a gray pallor and a hacking cough, led him into the room. "Just sign it, Ariana," he said, not meeting my eyes. He placed the dissolution of marriage papers on the cracked laminate table between the two queen beds. "It's an amicable split. No fault." I scanned the pages. It says shared custody. He finally looked at me, his eyes cold and defensive. "That's just the legal boilerplate. You know, my parents' offer stands. She'd be safe there, stable." He wasn't offering to share custody. He was offering me a way out of his financial life. By claiming shared custody, he could argue against paying significant child support, knowing full well I didn't have the money for a lawyer to fight him on it. He was washing his hands of me, of my scandal, and using our child as the soap. "Get out," I whispered. "Ariana, be reasonable. Get out." He left the papers. He also left a single key on the table. "The SUV. It's paid off. It's in your name. I don't want it. Consider it severance." That word again. The word people used when they were cutting a diseased limb off their body. I signed the papers. A week later, the motel manager was banging on the door. It was 11 in the morning. "Check out, lady. You're paid up through yesterday. Please," I begged, my voice cracking. "I just need a few more days. I'm expecting a wire." "I don't care what you're expecting," he spat, not looking at me, just at the clipboard in his hand. "You're out now, or I call the police." When I opened the door, our 2 duffel bags and the cheap cooler were already sitting on the grimy sidewalk. He had thrown us out. That night, we had nowhere to go. The sun was setting, turning the sky a brilliant, mocking orange and purple. Lena was tired, her cheerfulness finally fading into confusion. "Mama, where are we going? Is the hotel adventure over?" I looked at her small, trusting face in the rearview mirror. I looked at the old SUV. It was spacious. For a car, it was shelter. "No, baby," I said, forcing a brightness into my voice that felt like swallowing glass. "The best part is starting. We're going on a real adventure. We're going car camping." "Car camping? Like in the mountains?" Her eyes lit up. "Even better. We're urban explorers. It's a secret mission." I drove to a 24-hour supermarket, the biggest one I could find. I bought a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, a gallon of water, and new coloring book for Lena. I parked in the farthest corner of the lot, under a flickering security light, where a few other cars were parked in similar states of semi-permanence. That night, our life in the SUV began. I folded the back seats flat, creating a cargo space just large enough for us. I laid down our 2 thin blankets, the ones from the motel that I'd forgotten to return. Lena's stuffed rabbit, Mr. Floppy, went on our shared pillow, my balled-up winter coat. I tried to make it fun. I told her the dome light was our campfire and the hum of the freeway was a river. She believed me. Our days fell into a new, harsh rhythm. We woke up with the sun, the windows thick with condensation. We brushed our teeth with a bottle of water, spitting into the bushes of the supermarket parking lot. Then we would drive to the Redwood Valley Public Library. The library was our sanctuary. It was warm. It had immaculate bathrooms where I could wash our faces and smooth our clothes. It had free high-speed Wi-Fi. And most importantly, it had a children's section. Lena would sit for hours, attending story time with the other children, drawing, or playing on the kids' computers. She was happy. She was safe. I would sit at a corral in the adult section, my cheap laptop plugged into the wall, and I would apply for jobs. I sent out hundreds of resumes. At first, I applied for what I was, Chief Technology Officer, VP of Engineering, Senior Cybersecurity Architect. The rejections, when they came, were swift. Then I lowered my sights, Project Manager, Senior Developer. Nothing. Then, desperation. IT support, Administrative Assistant, Receptionist at a dental office, data entry. My name, Ariana Sanchez, was not just mud. It was radioactive poison. I was the woman on the cover of Valley Investor, not as a hero, but as the villain. I was a liability. No one would touch me. I finally got a phone interview, a small, 20-person startup. The HR manager sounded young and enthusiastic. We had a great conversation. He was impressed with my technical knowledge. At the end, he paused. "Hey, this is a weird question, but are you by any chance the same Ariana Sanchez from the Sentinel Vault?" You know, the whole Helix Fortress thing? My stomach turned to ice. Yes, but the allegations were completely fabricated. I was framed. I'm appealing the judgment. The line was quiet for a long, terrible second. Then his voice changed, becoming cool, professional, distant. I see. Well, thank you for your time, Miss Sanchez. The thing is, we just cannot in good faith put our core systems and our data architecture in the hands of someone who is even peripherally associated with an investigation for code fraud. We wish you the best of luck. The line went dead. He hadn't just rejected me. He had used my greatest strength as the weapon against me. Money was a constant, screaming terror. The pawn shop money was almost gone. We lived on the peanut butter and the cheap bread. I would buy Lena a single banana or a small carton of milk from the convenience store, and the purchase felt like a wild luxury. "What about you, Mama?" she would ask, holding out her sandwich. "Oh, Mommy's on a new health diet," I would say, forcing a smile. "I'm just drinking water. It's very healthy. Clears the system." I was so hungry my hands shook. I was so tired I could barely think. But I smiled. I smiled for Lena. The nights were the worst. After the library closed at 9 o'clock, we would return to our spot. Lena, exhausted from a day of playing, would fall asleep almost instantly, curled up against me for warmth. I couldn't sleep. I would sit in the driver's seat, the cheap laptop balanced on my knees, the screen glow casting a pale, ghostly light on my face. I tethered to the supermarket's weak, unsecured Wi-Fi. I wasn't just applying for jobs. I was fighting. I reviewed every email from the Helix Fortress lawyers, every scrap of fabricated evidence. I searched for legal precedents. I Googled corporate espionage, digital forgery, how to trace back-channel data. My CEO brain, the part of me that knew how to solve impossible problems, clicked back on. I was not just a homeless woman in a car. I was an investigator. I was going to find out who did this to me, even if I had to do it from a parking lot. By the way, if you're still with me, make sure to hit subscribe. More unbelievable stories are coming. Lena, in her innocence, was my anchor. She was remarkably resilient. She called the SUV the spaceship. "We're astronauts, Mama," she whispered one night, pointing up, "and we're exploring a new planet." She had taken the drawings she'd made at the library, drawings of big, beautiful houses with gardens, drawings of her in a real bed with a purple comforter, and we had used tape to stick them to the fabric ceiling of the car. I would wake up in the cold, gray dawn, my neck stiff, and the first thing I would see was a child's crayon drawing of a life we no longer had. The illusion of our adventure shattered on a Tuesday. It was late, maybe 2 in the morning. A sharp tap, tap, tap on the glass right next to my head. I bolted upright, my heart slamming against my ribs. A flashlight beam blinded me. A security guard. "Can't sleep here," he said, his voice a bored, gruff monotone. "Oh, I'm sorry, I was just resting my eyes. My daughter is sick. We're on our way to I don't care." He cut me off. "I see this vehicle here every night. This ain't a campground. This is private property. You got 10 minutes to move along, or I'm calling the police." Vagrancy. Vagrancy. That was the word. Not CEO. Not innovator. Not mother. Vagrant. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. I started the engine, the rumble waking Lena. "Mama, where are we going?" "The mission changed, sweetie," I choked out, pulling out of the parking spot. "We have to find a new planet." I drove aimlessly through the sleeping city, tears finally breaking free, hot and silent, blurring the empty streets. Where do you go when you have nowhere to go? We found another spot, a darker one, in an alley behind a closed-down warehouse. It felt less safe, but no one was there to chase us away. The next day, from the library, I tried a new low. I called old contacts, friends, people I had mentored, people I had given their first six-figure jobs. Most didn't pick up. My name, my number, was an incoming call they didn't want. One, a woman named Sarah, whom I had promoted twice, actually answered. Ariana. Her voice was cautious. "Sarah, hi," I said, my voice too bright, too desperate. "Hi, listen, I know this is out of the blue, but I'm in a tough spot. I was just wondering if you'd be willing to be a character reference, or maybe if you'd heard of anything at all, a long, Painful silence stretched down the line. "Ariana," she said finally, her voice hushed. I can't. I'm so sorry. My new firm? We do business with Helix Fortress. I just can't be seen. I can't be associated." Another pause. "I'm really sorry, Ari. Take care." She hung up. Take care. Every morning I would wake up in the cold, gray light. I would look at Lena, still asleep, her breath a small white cloud in the frigid air, her face so peaceful, her eyelashes dark against her pale skin. And I would make the same silent promise. I will get it all back. Not the company, not the magazine covers, not the glass house. I will get you a bed. I will get you a warm, safe bed. That morning, after Sarah hung up on me, I started the car. The engine sputtered, then caught. I looked down at the dashboard. The little orange fuel light was on. It had been on for a day now. The needle was visibly resting on E. I opened my wallet. The wallet Mark had given me, Italian leather. It was a joke. Inside, I had a single $5 bill and a handful of change. I counted it. $6.12. I looked at the gas gauge. I looked at my daughter humming in the back seat as she taped a new drawing of a castle to the window. I was a former CEO worth, on paper, hundreds of millions, and I was about to run out of gas. I finally understood. Pride does not keep you warm. Ethics do not buy you food. My father's lesson, as cruel as it was sinking in. I was at the bottom, and the edge was crumbling. The $6.12 bought me just under 2 gallons of gas. Enough to stop the needle from resting on E, but not enough to stop the orange light from glowing. It was a constant, dull reminder of how close we were to being truly stranded. That night, the weather turned. A brutal early winter storm rolled in from the Pacific, a churning mass of black clouds that unleashed cold, horizontal rain. The wind howled, shaking the SUV with violent gusts. I had parked us under a freeway overpass, thinking the concrete slab would offer some protection. Instead, it just amplified the sound, turning the roar of the wind into a hollow, booming echo chamber. Lena had been quiet all evening, picking at her half of a peanut butter sandwich. She had a small cough, a dry, sticky sound that I had been trying to ignore, attributing it to the cold, damp air we were constantly breathing. Now, in the hollow darkness of the car, the cough sounded wetter, heavier. "Mama," she whispered, her voice small. My rabbit. I can't find Mr. Floppy." "He's right here, sweetie," I murmured, feeling around in the dark. I clicked on a small dome light. Her face, illuminated in the pale, weak glow, was flushed a deep, unhealthy red. Her eyes were glassy. "You're okay, baby," I said, my voice automatically soothing, even as my heart began to pound a new, frantic rhythm. I reached over and pushed her damp curls off her forehead. She was on fire. Her skin wasn't just warm. It was burning, a dry, radiating heat that was terrifying. But she was shivering. Her whole small body was trembling under the thin blankets. "Mama, I'm cold," she whimpered. And her words, so contrary to the heat I was feeling, broke my panic open. No, baby. You're okay. Mama's here." My hands were shaking. I grabbed the gallon of water and a t-shirt, soaked a corner, and tried to wipe her face. She moaned and turned away, her body tensing. "It's too cold," she cried. Her breathing was shallow and fast. I put my ear to her chest, and I could hear a faint crackle like dry leaves. I didn't think. I leaped from the cargo space into the driver's seat, my jeans catching on the console. I jammed the key into the ignition. The engine, cold and damp, sputtered. Come on. It caught. I slammed the car into drive and peeled out from under the overpass, the tires screaming on the wet pavement, the rain lashing the windshield so hard the wipers were useless. I didn't know where the nearest hospital was. I just drove toward the brightest lights, my eyes straining, my heart chanting a single desperate prayer. Please, please, please. I saw a blue sign, St. Jude's. I had never been there. It wasn't the high-end medical center my family used. It was a city hospital. I didn't care. I pulled up to the emergency entrance, right past the no parking signs, and left the car running, hazards flashing. I ran to the back, ripped the door open, unbuckled Lena, and scooped her up. She was frighteningly limp, her head lolling against my shoulder, her body still consumed by those violent, rattling shivers. I burst through the automatic doors. The ER was a circle of hell. It was bright white, smelled of bleach and old coffee, and was filled with the sounds of chaos and machine beeping. A man groaning in a hallway, a cot baby screaming. I ran to the triage desk, a fortress of high laminate counters and bored, exhausted-looking nurses. "My daughter!" I gasped, the words tearing from my chest. "She's burning up. She can't breathe. Please." One nurse, her face a mask of practiced indifference, looked up from her computer screen. "Fill this out," she said, pushing a clipboard at me. "No, you don't understand. She's really sick." Lena let out a wheezing cough, a sound so awful it made the nurse finally look. Really look. She saw Lena's flushed face, her glassy eyes, her shuddering frame. The nurse's demeanor snapped. "Get her in here. Room 3 now." Everything became a blur. A doctor, young with dark circles under his eyes, was suddenly there, pressing a stethoscope to Lena's back, shining a light in her eyes. A nurse was wrapping a tiny blood pressure cuff around her arm. "Temp is 103.8, a voice said. O2 sat is 89. "Mom, what's her history?" the doctor asked, his voice sharp, not looking at me. No allergies. She was fine this morning. Just a cough. We've been sleeping in the car. It's cold." The last part came out as a whisper. The doctor's eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. There was no judgment, just exhaustion. "Okay, it looks like a nasty case of pneumonia. We're going to start her on a broad-spectrum antibiotic, getting 4 in, and she needs oxygen. We need to admit her. We'll run a full panel, chest x-ray. A few days at least, get her stabilized." Relief washed over me. So total, so profound that my knees buckled. A few days. Stabilized. They were going to help her. "Thank you." I wept. "Thank you so much." A nurse, this one with a kind, older face, gently touched my arm. "Let's get her set up. I just need you to go to the admissions desk. Get her registered, right out here to the left." "Okay. Yes, of course." I stumbled back out to the main desk, to a different window marked admissions and financials. A woman in a neat blue blazer sat behind a glass. "Name?" she asked. "Lena Sanchez. She's just being admitted. Pneumonia. Insurance card and a copay." The words froze me. Insurance. My Cobra payments had lapsed the month before. I hadn't had the $400. "I don't have insurance right now," I said. The woman's smile didn't change, but her eyes hardened. "Okay, that's fine. We'll have to take a deposit for the admission. For multi-day pneumonia case, let's see," she typed. A printer next to her word. She pulled off the sheet and slid it under the glass. It was an estimate. The number at the bottom had 4 zeros. It was a financial death sentence. "I don't have this," I whispered. "My accounts are frozen. It's a legal issue. Please, I'm her mother. Isn't there a form, something I can sign?" "This is the form, ma'am," she said, tapping the paper. "I have a debit card," I said, my voice rising in panic. I pulled my wallet out, the debit card for the one checking account I'd opened, the one I'd put the pawn shop money into. It was almost empty. "Maybe you could just hold it?" She took the card, her expression unchanging. She swiped it. The little machine made an angry beep. "Declined." "Try it again." I insisted. "It's a new account. Sometimes it's finicky." She swiped it again with exaggerated slowness. Beep. "Declined." She slid the card back to me. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We can't admit her without a deposit or active insurance." "But the doctor said." My world was tilting. "The doctor said she needs to be admitted. He said she needs oxygen." "And she does," the woman said, and for the first time, a sliver of genuine, practiced sympathy entered her voice. It was a script, but we are not a state-funded clinic. What I can do is have the doctor write you a prescription for a Tylenol suppository and an oral antibiotic. You could try to manage the fever at home. Keep her hydrated. But for an inpatient admission, our hands are tied. Rage, cold and black, eclipsed the panic. "My daughter is sick. She is 7. And you're turning her away over a piece of paper? Over a deposit? How can you? How can this system? How can you do this?" "Ma'am, if you're going to raise your voice, I will have to call security." She had already turned back to her computer. I was dismissed. I walked back to room 3 like a zombie. The kind nurse was just attaching the oxygen monitor to Lena's finger. Lena whimpered, her eyes still closed. What are you doing? I asked. Oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry, the nurse said, her kindness now feeling like a fresh wound. Admissions said you're taking her home. The doctor's just signing the prescriptions. They were discharging her. They were sending a 7-year-old with pneumonia and an 89% oxygen level back out into a monsoon. I picked Lena up. Her small, hot body felt impossibly heavy. I didn't take the prescriptions. I knew I didn't have the $20 to fill them. I walked back through the automatic doors. The car was still running, its red hazard lights flashing, pathetic beacons in the driving rain. The wind ripped the door from my hand as I tried to open the back. I got inside, the smell of wet upholstery and our own cramped life enveloping us. I laid Lena down on the blankets. I took off my own coat, the only warm, dry thing I had, and spread it over her. I used the last of the bottled water on the t-shirt and wiped her face, her neck, her arms. I gave her a few sips of the cheap children's fever reducer I'd bought at the supermarket, my only medicine. She coughed and choked it down. I climbed into the driver's seat, soaked to the skin, my own teeth chattering. The rain was so loud, it was like we were inside a drum. The thunder cracked right over the overpass, and the ground itself seemed to shake. I put my head down on the steering wheel, and I broke. I didn't just cry. I howled. A raw, animal sound of pure, bottomless despair that I've been holding back for months. I pounded the wheel with my fists. I prayed for the first time since I was a child. Not to God, but to the universe, to anything. Please, I sobbed. Please don't take her. Take me. Take anything. Just don't let her. Please. I can't. Lena's coughing from the back seat cut through my breakdown. It was worse. It was a sharp, barking, desperate sound. A fight for air. I snapped upright. I was going to do it. I was going to drive to Northgate Hills. I was going to drive the SUV through my father's wrought iron gates. I would set the car on fire on his lawn. I would throw a rock through their window. I would do something to make them see, to make them help. I would trade my last shred of dignity. I would beg on my hands and knees. I would be their reputation ruin they so feared, right on their doorstep. I put the car in gear, my eyes blinded by tears and rage. At that exact moment, as I was about to pull out, a pair of headlights, brighter than any I had ever seen, sliced through the darkness. They didn't just pass. They slowed. A long, impossibly black sedan, a Bentley. My mind registered a useless detail from my old life, pulled up alongside me, its engine a low, confident purr. My first thought was security or police. They were here to arrest the vagrant who had left her car running at the ER. The passenger window of the Bentley glided down. A soft, warm light spilled out. A light, soft tap, tap, tap came at my window, which was inches from the Bentley's. I flinched. Then, my hand shaking, I pressed the button to lower my own window. The rain and wind blasted my face. Standing in the tiny gap between the two cars, as if the storm did not exist, was a woman. She was middle-aged, with sharp, intelligent eyes and hair pulled back in a severe bun. She was wearing a simple, elegant black raincoat, and she wasn't even remotely wet. She didn't shout over the storm. She spoke in a calm, clear, projecting voice. "Miss Sanchez." I just stared dumbfounded. "Miss Ariana Sanchez." "Yes," I managed to say. The woman nodded as if a complex problem had just been solved. "My name is Nina Morales. I am the housekeeper for Mr. Roman Lockhart." The name meant nothing to me. "I'm sorry," I said, the rain blowing in and stinging my face. You have the wrong person. I've never met anyone by that name. I don't know a Roman Lockhart." The woman, Nina Morales, didn't blink. The storm howled around her, but she seemed to exist in a small pocket of perfect, unnerving calm. "You do not know him, Miss Sanchez, but you saved him. 12 years ago, Highway 17, during a storm just like this. You pulled him from a burning car." The words hit me like a physical blow. A key turning in a lock I had forgotten existed. 12 years ago, I was 22, a new software engineer just 6 months out of college, driving my first car, the same SUV, though it was newer then. I was driving home from a late-night coding session, exhausted. The memory, buried under a decade of ambition and life. And now, failure, rushed back with perfect, sudden clarity. The rain, just like this. The treacherous, winding curves of Highway 17 that cut through the Santa Cruz Mountains. I was going slow, my old wipers fighting a losing battle. Then I saw it, a pair of headlights ahead of me, swerving wildly on the slick pavement. A dark sedan. It clipped the concrete barrier, shot across the empty lanes, and slammed into the rocky embankment on the other side. I was the only other car on the road. I pulled over. I remember my heart hammering, my hands shaking. I left my headlights on, pointed at the wreck. The car was crumpled, and there was a smell. Gasoline and smoke, a wisp of it from under the hood. I didn't think. I ran. The driver's door was jammed. I screamed at the window, "Are you okay?" But the man inside was slumped over the wheel, unmoving. There was blood. I ran back to my SUV. Adrenaline, a hot, metallic taste in my mouth. I tore through my trunk and found the tire iron. I ran back. I remember the shatter of the glass, the rain, and the small, sharp fragments spraying my face. I reached in, my hand cutting on the remaining glass, and fumbled for the seatbelt release. It was stuck. The smoke was thicker now, turning from white to a greasy, sick black. I screamed, "Fire!" to the empty, rainy night. I pulled at the man's arm. He was heavy, unconscious. I put my feet on the car door and pulled with a strength I didn't know I possessed. The seatbelt, under the dead weight, finally gave way. I dragged him out, his suit jacket ripping, my arms screaming. I dragged him 20, maybe 30 feet back toward my own car. And then the wreck whooshed. Not an explosion like in movies. A sudden, violent roar as the gasoline caught, and the whole front end of the car was engulfed in a bright orange sheet of fire. I stood there, gasping in the rain, staring at the man on the wet asphalt and the inferno that had been his car. I had called 911 on my old flip phone, my voice trembling. There's a crash. Highway 17. Mile marker. I don't know. A man. He's hurt. The car is on fire. I stayed until I heard the sirens in the distance, a wail cutting through the storm. Then I looked at the man. He was breathing, and I was a 22-year-old kid on a probationary new hire contract. I had a final project review in the morning. I had just saved a man's life. I didn't want to be late. I got back in my SUV, my hands covered in his blood and my own, and I drove away. I never gave my name. I never filed a report. It was just a thing that had happened on a dark night. I hadn't thought about that night in at least 10 years. I was staring at Nina Morales, the rain dripping from my chin, the memory screaming in my head. From the back seat of the SUV, Lena let out a hacking, wet cough that shattered the moment. I remember that. I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. I never knew his name. His name is Roman Lockhart, Nina said, her voice softening just a fraction. He is the founder and chairman of the Lockhart Transit Group, a logistics and autonomous transport empire. He is one of the wealthiest men you have never heard of because he values his privacy above all else. She continued, her voice calm and steady, as if she were explaining a quarterly report. He has been looking for the girl with the gray hoodie in the old sedan for 12 years, Miss Sanchez. He is a man of significant resources, and he spent a great deal of them trying to find you. But you left no trace. But how? Why now? He is dying. Cancer. He wanted to find you before the end. When your company's legal issues became public, it triggered an alert in the private investigation protocols he set up. Your name was suddenly in court filings, tied to newspaper articles and the vehicle registration records for your asset seizure. They still listed this SUV, the one from 12 years ago. He has been watching you, Miss Sanchez. He has been watching what they did to you for the last 3 months. My mind reeled. A billionaire had been watching me fail, watching me lose everything. As if she read my mind, Nina's gaze shifted, moving past my face into the dark interior of my car. Her sharp, intelligent eyes landed on the small, huddled shape under my coat in the back. She heard the cough, the same one that was tearing my own heart apart. The professional, ice-calm demeanor cracked. That child is sick, she stated. It was not a question. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. You were at a hospital that just turned you away. Are you not? She asked. The shame and rage were so total, I could only nod again. Nina's voice became steel. Follow me. Mr. Roman has a full medical wing at his home. He has a private, round-the-clock physician and no shortage of hospital beds. We do not need your insurance. We do not need your money. We just need to go now. She was already turning to get back in the Bentley. My mind was screaming. No, this was insane. This was a nightmare. A stranger in a Bentley in the middle of a storm, talking about a billionaire I'd saved a decade ago. It was a con. A kidnapping. It was impossible. But then Lena coughed again. A small, weak rattling sound. The sound of a little body that was losing its fight. The hospital had turned me away. My parents had turned me away. My husband had turned me away. The entire world had turned me away. This woman, this stranger, was offering a doctor. I put the car in drive. The old engine rumbled, a pathetic counterpoint to the Bentley's silent power. Okay, I whispered to the empty, rain-lashed windshield. Okay. The Bentley's red tail lights were my only guide. We left the hospital parking lot, left the city streets, and merged onto the freeway, but we didn't stay on it long. We headed north toward the coast, onto a dark, twisting two-lane highway I had never driven. The storm was a living thing out here. The wind slammed into the SUV, trying to push me off the road. Rain came in blinding sheets. To my right, I could see nothing, just a black void that I knew instinctively was the ocean. To my left, massive, ancient pine trees thrashed in the wind, their branches scraping the sky. I was terrified. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. My gas light was still on, but the red lights of the Bentley stayed steady, never going too fast, pulling me forward through the darkness. After what felt like an hour, the Bentley turned. It turned onto a road that wasn't a road. It was an unmarked gravel path, hidden by cypress trees. I followed. The path was long, winding up a steep hill, and then I saw the gates. They were massive, made of black iron, at least 20 feet high, set into a wall of dark, mossy stone. The letters Lockhart Cliff Estate were worked into the iron, so subtle you would miss them if you weren't looking. The gates didn't buzz. They didn't groan. They just swung open, silent as a tomb. We drove through. The driveway was paved with old cobblestones, winding through a private forest so dense it blocked out the storm. It was suddenly quiet, and then the house appeared. It was not a house. It was a fortress. It was not a modern glass box like the one I had lost. It was a sprawling, multi-level mansion of rough-hewn gray stone and dark, heavy timbers built directly into the side of the cliff. It looked as if it had been there for 1,000 years. Warm yellow light spilled from its many windows, a stark, defiant contrast to the cold, blue-black of the storm and the sea. The Bentley pulled under a vast covered entrance, a portico large enough to hold 3 cars. I stopped behind it, my engine idling, my heart in my throat. Before I could even process what to do, my back door was pulled open. Nina was there. With her was a man in dark, tailored slacks and a crisp white shirt, and another man in medical scrubs. "This is Dr. Albescu," Nina said, indicating the man in scrubs. He was older, with a kind, serious face and a European accent. "Hello," he said quickly. He didn't wait for my permission. He was already leaning into my car, his movements economical and practiced. Lena was awake, her eyes half open, whimpering. He put a hand on her forehead. "Listen to her chest for 2 seconds. She needs oxygen." Now, a nurse, who had appeared from a side door with a gurney, was suddenly there. Dr. Albescu and the nurse, with a gentleness and speed that was breathtaking, lifted Lena from the car seat and onto the gurney. I scrambled out of the car, my legs numb. "Wait, where are you taking her?" "To the medical wing," Nina said, her hand on my elbow, steadying me. "This way. You can come." She guided me through a side entrance into the warmest, quietest, most beautiful house I had ever seen. The floors were polished wood. The air smelled of old books and beeswax. We didn't go to the main rooms. We went down a long hall through a set of unmarked double doors. And suddenly, I was in a hospital, a fully equipped, state-of-the-art 2-bed medical clinic. Monitors, oxygen tanks, computer terminals, sterile counters. The team placed Lena on one of the beds. A small oxygen mask was gently slipped over her face. The doctor was already opening a sterile pack. The nurse was setting up in 4. They moved with a calm, focused efficiency that made the ER at St. Jude's look like a chaotic joke. I stood in the doorway, my wet clothes dripping onto the polished floor, trembling, useless. I watched as the monitor above Lena's bed lit up, and her oxygen saturation number began to rise. Within hours, Lena was stable, asleep, her breathing deep and even, the fever broken. I sat by her side, the quiet hum of the medical machines a lullaby. Nina Morales brought me clean, dry clothes, a hot meal, and a mug of steaming tea. "Mr. Lockhart would like to see you," she said softly, after Lena had slept for a while. "When you're ready." Roman Lockhart. The name no longer felt foreign. It was now tied to a flicker of hope. I walked into a magnificent library, filled with ancient books and the scent of leather. He was there, frail and hooked up to a small, discreet oxygen tank, but his eyes, piercing and alive, held an intensity that belied his condition. "Miss Sanchez," he rasped, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I knew you were the one. You saved my life once. Now, it seems, I have saved yours and your daughter's." He waved a hand toward a small mahogany table. On it sat a single, plain manila file. "I told you I've been watching. Your parents, your husband, Helix Fortress Labs. They all thought you were disposable. They thought they'd won." His voice hardened. "They were wrong. They underestimated the tenacity of a woman, a mother, who was deemed too ethical. That file contains everything you need. The proof of the fraud, the corporate espionage, the digital forgery. It names names, provides evidence, and exposes every single gray contract your father forced through and Helix Fortress profited from. It's the beginning of their end, Ariana, and the start of yours." My eyes widened, a cold, fierce fire igniting within me, consuming the last embers of despair. This wasn't just about Lena's safety anymore. This was about justice. This was about making those who had broken me pay. My revenge would be cold, precise, and utterly satisfying. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had everything ripped away, only to find an unexpected path to reclaim your power? Tell me what you think. I really want to know. I thought I was a broken woman, on the run, with absolutely nothing left to lose. Then a dead man left me an empire, and suddenly I had everything to fight for. The number climbed on the monitor, 89, then 90, 91. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. No one had asked for an insurance card. No one had asked for a credit card. 10 agonizing minutes later, it hit 95. Nina's breathing, though still shallow, had finally lost that desperate, rattling edge. She was stable. A gentle touch on my arm startled me. I hadn't even realized Nina, the stern but kind housekeeper, was still beside me. "She's in good hands, Miss Sanchez," she said softly. "Dr. Albescu will stay with her now. Mr. Lockhart would like to see you." I was utterly adrift, in a daze of relief and exhaustion. I let her lead me back out of that makeshift medical ward, down a quieter, carpeted hall. We stopped at a pair of massive, heavy doors, dark cherry wood gleaming faintly. Nina paused, her face grave. "He is very weak. The end is very near. This will be difficult. Please be prepared." She opened one of the doors. The room inside was vast, yet was far from empty. It was a master bedroom, dominated by a huge, now cold, fireplace. But one side of the room had been completely transformed, a full-blown hospital ward with poles, beeping monitors, and a ventilator machine. A private night, nurse nodded silently to Nina and slipped out, leaving us alone. In the center of it all was a large, fully articulated hospital bed, and in that bed, a man. He was a wisp, gnarled and impossibly thin. His body seemed lost in the crisp white sheets. His skin, the color of old parchment, was translucent, stretched taut over the sharp bones of his face. He looked like he was in his late 60s, but I knew in my gut that cancer had stolen decades, leaving behind nothing but this fragile, hollowed-out shell. His eyes were closed. I stood at the foot of the bed, feeling like a ghost myself, a 34-year-old vagrant, dripping rainwater and the residue of failure onto a priceless antique rug, staring at the billionaire I had saved and then utterly forgotten. Nina moved to the bedside. She didn't touch him, just spoke, her voice soft but clear. "Sir? Mr. Roman." No response. She tried again, a little louder. "Sir, she is here. The girl. The girl from the highway. Ariana. She is here." His eyelids, thin as paper, fluttered slowly, with an effort that seemed to consume every last ounce of his strength. Then they opened. His eyes. They weren't dull, not at all. They were a pale, piercing blue, and they were shockingly alive. They scanned the room, unfocused at first, then they landed on me. He stared, and I stared back. A flicker, a spark of recognition, of knowing. This was the first time in his life he had ever seen my face. A smile formed on his lips, a dry, cracked, painful-looking twitch. A sound, a dry, papery rustle, escaped his throat. I wondered, he whispered, his voice so weak I had to lean in to hear it, if I would get to thank you before I died. The next morning, I woke up to silence. Not the roaring silence of the overpass or the tense, fearful silence of the parking lot, but a deep, profound, and peaceful quiet. I was on a ridiculously soft bed in a guest room that was larger than my entire first apartment. The storm had passed, leaving behind a clean, cold, sunlit world outside. I shot out of bed, my heart instantly pounding. Lena. I ran barefoot down the carpeted hall, straight to the medical wing. The doors were open. I found her, not in the hospital bed, but in the second, unused one, which had been remade with soft white linens. She was asleep, genuinely, deeply asleep. The terrible, flushed red was gone from her face, her skin a normal, pale olive. The rattling in her chest was quiet. A thin four-line was taped to her small hand, a clear bag dripping steadily above her. The oxygen mask was gone, replaced by a simple, clear nasal cannula, and the monitor next to her bed showed a steady, beautiful 98. Dr. Albescu was sitting in a chair in the corner, reading a medical journal. He looked up as I entered, a small, kind smile touching his face. "Good morning, Miss Sanchez." The fever broke around 3 a.m. The antibiotics are working their magic. She has a strong case of pneumonia, but she's a strong girl. She is past the crisis. I walked over to the bed and carefully placed my hand on her forehead. It was cool, just cool. I had to brace myself against the bed frame as the relief, the sheer, bone-deep gratitude hit me so hard it made me dizzy. I was a guest in a billionaire's fortress, a vagrant in a borrowed silk robe, and my daughter was safe. The debt I felt in that moment was suffocating. Absolute. "You're okay, baby," I whispered, kissing her hair. "She will be," the doctor said, closing his journal. "She needs to stay on the antibiotics for at least a week, and I want to monitor her for another 48 hours. But the worst is over." Nina appeared in the doorway, as silently as ever. She was holding a tray with coffee and toast. "Miss Sanchez, I'm glad you slept. When you are ready, Mr. Lockhart is awake. He has asked for you." An hour later, I was showered, dressed in clean, simple clothes, a black sweater and gray slacks that had been magically left in my closet, perfectly my size. I was clean, fed, and my daughter was breathing. I felt like a stranger in my own skin, an actor who had been given a new, unbelievable part to play. I went back to Roman's room. The morning light was pouring in, but it couldn't quite reach the man in the bed. He looked even more fragile than he had the night before, but his pale blue eyes were open, alert, and fixed on the doorway as I entered. "Miss Sanchez," he rasped. "Come in. Sit." Nina adjusted his pillows and left a glass of water with a straw near his hand, then melted away, leaving us alone. I took the hardback chair by his bed. "How is your girl?" he asked, his voice a dry whisper. She's so much better. Your doctor, what you've done. I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Lockhart." "You already did. Ariana," he said, using my first name. It sounded strange coming from him. "You paid me back 12 years ago, on a highway. With interest. I'm just settling a long overdue account." He paused, taking a slow, shallow breath. "Nina told you, I suppose, that I've been watching." I nodded, unsure what to say. That night on the highway, he continued, his eyes drifting to the ceiling as if watching a movie only he could see, that was not an accident. I built an empire, child. Lockhart Transit. Trucks, logistics, now autonomous fleets. When you build something that big, you're not just a businessman. You're a target. You are a king with 100 usurpers. He turned his piercing gaze back to me. My brakes were cut. An elegant, simple, brutal solution. A rival. A network of rivals, I came to believe, wanted me dead. They wanted my company, and I was in the way. That crash was meant to be my end. He spoke with a chilling, matter-of-fact detachment. When I woke up in the hospital, my first thought was not gratitude. It was paranoia. A very, very useful paranoia. I hired the best private investigators in the world. Not to find out if I was a target, but to find out who. We found a trail, a complex web of financial shell corporations, offshore accounts, payments for security consulting on my vehicles that were in fact payments for sabotage. Did you find them? I asked, leaning forward, suddenly feeling less like a nursemaid and more like a co-conspirator. A shadow of a smile crossed his lips. Almost. We found the money trail, but it went cold. The contracts were signed by ghosts. The network was too smart, too layered. They buried it. I had my suspicions, but I never got the final, damning piece of proof. And in the meantime, I tried to find you. The girl in the hoodie, I whispered. The girl in the hoodie, he confirmed. My second, more personal obsession. You were a ghost, too. You saved my life, and you just vanished. No witnesses, no report. You didn't even stay for the ambulance. He took another shallow breath. For 12 years, I've had my people looking. It was a test I gave new investigators. Find the girl from Highway 17. They always failed. Until now, I said. Until now, he agreed. Until I was dying. And until you reappeared. My lead investigator, a bulldog of a man, he's had an alert on your name for years, just on the 1 in a million chance. And 3 months ago, it lit up like a Christmas tree. Ariana Sanchez, Sentinel Vault Technologies, Helix Fortress Labs, lawsuit, fraud, asset forfeiture. He took a shaky sip of water. I read the court filings, Ariana. All of them. I read the evidence they used against you. The forged emails, the planted server logs, the offshore shell companies. It was familiar. It was the same playbook. The same surgical, soulless assassination I had seen before. They were not just trying to beat you in business. They were trying to erase you. I stared at him, my hands gripping the armrests of the chair. He knew. He had seen it. He was the only person on earth who had looked at the case and not seen a criminal, but a victim. They won, I said, the words tasting like ash. They ruined me. I lost everything. No, he rasped. He pointed a thin, trembling finger at me. They have not. They took your company. They took your money. Do not let them take you. When I saw what they were doing to the one person who saved my life, the one person who did a good, decent thing for no reward, I knew. He seemed to gather himself, his voice becoming clearer. I have a daughter, Serena. She is not like you. She was born into the empire. She sees it as her birthright, her playground. She does not understand the blood and the paranoia that built it. She does not understand the cost. His eyes held mine, and the force of his will, even in this emaciated state, was staggering. I built an empire, Ariana, he said, and the words resonated in the quiet, sterile room. But I have come to realize in these last few months that the most valuable thing I own is not the company. It is not the real estate. It is the chance. The chance to choose someone who will be better than me when I am gone. Someone who understands what it is to build and what it is to lose. Someone who has been tested by fire. He lay back, exhausted by the speech. Nina, he whispered, I think I will rest. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, my throat thick, and left the room. Roman Lockhart died 3 days later. It was early, just after 5 in the morning. A thick, wet fog had rolled in from the sea, blanketing the estate, muffling the whole world in a cold, gray shroud. Nina woke me with a gentle hand on my shoulder. He is gone. The funeral was 2 days after that. It wasn't in a church. It was in the small, walled garden on the edge of the cliff, overlooking the churning gray ocean. The fog was still thick. There was no press, no business partners. The attendees were Nina, Dr. Olbescu, the two night nurses, the head of his security, and me. There was no family. I stood in the back, wearing a simple, elegant black suit that Nina had provided. Lena, her pneumonia now a fading, treatable cough, was back in a medical wing, playing a video game with the day nurse. A string quartet played something by Bach, the notes sounding thin and mournful in the damp air. A simple, unmarked mahogany casket was lowered into the ground. I didn't cry for the billionaire I had never known. I cried for the man who, in his final days, had been the only person in the world to look at me with anything other than accusation or contempt. I cried because I felt, in a strange and profound way, that I had just lost the only ally I had left. The day after the funeral, Nina approached me. "Miss Sanchez, Lena is clear to travel, but she should not be in a cold car. Mr. Lockhart has made arrangements. A car, a hotel, a fund to get you back on your feet." I was about to accept. I was about to take the charity and disappear. Then the phone call came. It wasn't for Nina. It was for me. "Miss Ariana Sanchez, this is Harvey Cole of Cole, Racine, and Finch. I was Mr. Roman Lockhart's personal attorney. I am calling to request your presence in my office tomorrow at 10 a.m. for the reading of Mr. Lockhart's last will and testament." I almost dropped the phone. Me? I think there's been a mistake. I wasn't his family. "No mistake, Miss Sanchez," the voice, dry and lawyerly, replied. 10 a.m. Our offices are at 2 Embarcadero. A car will be sent for you. The next day, I was the one in the back of a black Bentley, driving into the city. I was wearing the same borrowed black suit. Lena was safe at the estate with Nina. The offices of Cole, Racine, and Finch were on the 45th floor of a steel and glass tower that scraped the sky. The reception area was a silent, beige expanse of priceless modern art and panoramic views of the San Francisco Bay. Harvey Cole was an older man, tall and impeccably dressed, with the same sharp, intelligent eyes I had seen in Nina. He led me to a conference room. The table was a single, massive slab of polished granite. He didn't offer small talk. He just sat, opened a thick, leather-bound portfolio, and put on his glasses. "Miss Sanchez, I will be brief." Roman was an efficient man. He did not like ambiguity. As his counsel for 35 years, I am legally bound to execute his final wishes, however unorthodox they may be. He cleared his throat. "I will skip the legal formalities regarding bequests to staff and charities. The pertinent section is this. To my only daughter, Serena Lockhart, I leave the properties in New York and Paris in the sum of $50 million to be placed in a blind trust administered by Mr. Cole. May this be enough for her to find a happiness she never found with me or the company I built. Lockhart Transit Group. She is to have no share, no vote, and no control." I held my breath. $50 million. A small bequest, I thought. Harvey Cole turned a page. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "And now, the residuary estate. To Ariana Sanchez of Redwood Valley, California, the woman who 12 years ago gave me back my life, and who this year showed me the true meaning of integrity under fire, I leave the following. The controlling 60% majority stake in the Lockhart Transit Group, the entirety of the Lockhart Cliff Estate and all its holdings, and the remainder of my personal liquid assets and private portfolio valued at." He paused, as if to make sure I was listening. He said, and I quote, "I do this not as a payment for a debt, but as a transfer of a burden. I give her this power, this empire, because she is the only person I have ever met who did not want it, and who might therefore be the only one to wield it with a conscience. She was tested by fire. Now she will be tempered by it." He finished reading. He took off his glasses. The room was utterly silent, save for the hum of the city far below. He slid a single-page summary across the granite table. I looked at it. My name was at the top. The numbers. I couldn't process the numbers. There were too many zeros. It wasn't millions. It was billions. I was not just not poor. I was one of the richest, most powerful people in the state. My hand was shaking as I reached for the paper, the same hand that had signed the dissolution of my own company just weeks before. I thought I would feel relief. I thought I would feel triumph. I felt sick. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and the man who had just died had pushed me off. Harvey Cole's voice was gentle. Miss Sanchez, are you all right? I looked at him, my eyes wide. His daughter, Serena, the one who gets the trust. Yes, he said, his face unreadable. She is aware of the will's contents. She is displeased. I stood up, my legs weak. I walked to the massive floor-to-ceiling window. I looked down at the city, at the cars like tiny ants, at the empire I had just inherited. I was not Ariana Sanchez, the failed CEO. I was not Ariana, the vagrant in the SUV. I was, according to the paper in my trembling hand, the new owner of Lockhart Transit Group. And I had a terrible, sinking, intuitive feeling that Serena Lockhart, the woman I had just disinherited, was not going to send a polite condolence card. I had just traded one war for another. By the way, if you're still with me, make sure to hit subscribe. More unbelievable stories are coming. I was still standing by the window, my hand clutching the one-page summary, when Harvey Cole cleared his throat. I turned. He was holding something else. It wasn't a legal document. It was a thick, heavy envelope made of creamy, expensive cardstock. It was sealed on the back, not with a standard clasp, but with a large, ominous dollop of dark red wax, pressed with a signet I didn't recognize. He held it out. Roman left one other item. This. It was to be given to me only after the will was read, and only, he was very specific, if I accepted the terms. Accepted the terms? I said, my voice barely a whisper. Your presence here, Miss Sanchez, after our initial call, was, in Roman's view, a provisional acceptance, Harvey said, his face impassive. My instructions are to give this to you. What you do with it is no longer his concern, or for that matter mine. I took the envelope. It was heavy, heavier than it should have been. On the front, in Roman's shaky, spidery handwriting, were 5 words. For Ariana, and only her. The drive back to Lockhart Cliff Estate was silent. The car was the same, but the world was different. I was no longer a refugee. I was the owner. The driver, the same man who had picked me up, kept calling me ma'am, but his tone had changed. It was no longer polite. It was deferential. It made my skin crawl. Lena was in the grand library with Nina when I returned, the two of them building a castle out of wooden blocks in front of a roaring fireplace. My daughter, who had been sleeping in the back of a car just 72 hours ago, was now playing in a room that looked like it belonged to a duke. She ran to me, happy and healthy, her cheeks pink. Mama, Nina said this whole house is a castle, and we're princesses. I hugged her, burying my face in her clean, sweet-smelling hair. I felt the heavy, rigid corner of the envelope in my suit jacket pocket, pressing against my ribs. That evening, after Lena was asleep in her new, enormous bed, after the house had fallen into its deep, oceanside quiet, I went to find answers. I didn't go to my own guest room. I went to Roman's study. It was on the main floor, a room I hadn't yet entered. It was him, dark mahogany, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with first editions, leather-bound volumes, and strangely, dozens of technical manuals on jet propulsion and logistics. One wall wasn't a wall. It was a single, massive sheet of glass that looked out over the black, churning sea. The only light came from a green-shaded banker's lamp on a desk the size of a small car. I sat in his chair. It was a high-backed, cracked leather throne, still molded to his shape. I placed the envelope on the desk, the red wax seal facing up like a single drop of blood. I sat there for an hour, just staring at it, listening to the sound of the waves crashing on the rocks far below. It was a violent, constant sound, the sound of power. Only if she accepts the inheritance. I had accepted. I had not corrected the driver. I had let Nina put my daughter to bed in a room that was not mine. I was here. This was the price of admission. My fingers, no longer shaking, were steady. I took a heavy brass letter opener from the desk, a miniature sword, and sliced the seal, breaking the wax. Inside were 2 things. The first was a letter, several pages long, written on thick, personal stationery. The handwriting was the same as on the envelope, Roman's. Shaky, thin, but ruthlessly clear. The second was a dossier, not a letter but a file. A thick, bound report with tabs, plastic sleeve photographs, and what looked like folded contracts. It was organized, clinical. It looked like the investigation file I had been trying to build against Helix Fortress from the back of my SUV. I read the letter first. My dearest Ariana, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you are the new mistress of this house on the cliff. I have given you an empire. I'm so very, very sorry, but I'm also, for the first time in a decade, at peace. You're the only one who could understand this. You're the only one I could trust with it. I have left you more than trucks and stock certificates. I have left you the one thing I cannot solve, the one loose end, the one ghost that has haunted my every waking moment since the night you pulled me from that fire. I told you I was hunted. I told you a network of rivals tried to have me killed. I spent 12 years and a small fortune trying to find the man who signed the order, who cut the brakes. I found him, and that is why I need your forgiveness. It was not one rival. It was a private investment group, a cabal, operating under the guise of a hostile takeover. They wanted my routes, my patents, my future. I was an obstacle to be removed. They created a series of shell companies, moving money through 3 different countries to pay a security consultant, a euphemism for a corporate assassin, to arrange my accident on Highway 17. The money trail was a masterpiece of deception. It took my investigators until 6 months ago to finally unravel the last knot, to find the source account, the signature on the wire transfer that paid the killer. My heart was pounding. I could hear the blood in my ears, louder than the ocean. The group that led the cabal, the primary signatory on the offshore accounts, the firm that stood to gain the most by my death, was a company I had long suspected but could never prove. A company called Carter Sterling Holdings. I stopped breathing. It wasn't possible. It was a mistake. A different Carter. I read the line again. Carter Sterling Holdings. My father's company. My mother's. I felt suddenly, violently sick, the room tilting, the bookshelves swaying. I gripped the arms of the leather chair. No, no. I read on, my vision blurring. My investigators brought me the final proof. The wire transfers. The minutes from their secret partnership meeting. And the signatures. Yes, Ariana, I knew. I knew the moment I saw the name. I knew it was your father. I knew that Elliot Carter, the man whose blood runs in your veins, had tried to have me murdered for a business deal. And I was faced with a choice. I could go to the prosecutors. I could destroy him. I could burn his life to the ground, just as he had left me to burn in that car. It would have been justice. But then I thought of you. The girl in the hoodie, the one decent person in this entire miserable story. How could I punish the person who pulled me from the fire by setting her entire family ablaze? How could I repay the ultimate act of goodness with the ultimate act of vengeance? So I stayed silent. I put the file away. I let them live. I told myself it was for you. And then I got sick. And then I saw what they were doing to you. I saw your company burn. I saw the same playbook, the lies, the forgeries, the media assassination. I watched your own father, the man who tried to murder me, let you be destroyed for a reputation, ruined. And my cancer, it seems, burned away my sentimentality. It made me rethink the very nature of justice. I am not giving this file to the prosecutors, Ariana. I'm not giving it to the police. I'm giving it to you. Let the person who is wrong decide. Let the person who, like me, was framed and cast out be the one to cast the stone. Justice or forgiveness. They both have a price. This is my last and most terrible bequest to you. Choose well. R. My hand was numb. The letter slipped from my fingers and fell to the desk. I was hollow. I was not a person. I was a vacuum. Then slowly, mechanically, like a robot, I reached for the dossier. I had to see. I had to know it was real. I opened the cover. The first tab was contracts. The first document was a scanned copy of a strategic partnership agreement between 3 shell corporations. At the bottom of the last page were the signatures. The signatories for the managing partners, Elliot Carter. And beneath his, a signature I knew as well as my own, Diane Carter, my mother. The next tab, financials. Scanned wire transfers from a Carter Sterling account in the Caymans to a security consulting firm in Panama. The memo line was blank. The amount was $2 million. The next tab, surveillance. Grainy, long lens photographs. My father and two other men I didn't recognize, sitting at a table in a high-end restaurant I knew. The date stamp on the photo was 3 days before Roman's crash. Another photo. My mother walking out of a different bank, one known for its offshore discretion. The last tab, internal communications. A single, printed-out email recovered by Roman's investigators from a hacked server. It was from my father's right-hand man to an untraceable address. The subject was the Lockhart problem. The body was one sentence. The partners have agreed. It is time for a permanent solution. I closed the file. I leaned back in the leather chair. I felt nothing. The shock was so total, so absolute, it had short-circuited my ability to feel. My family, the people who had called me a stain, the people who had told me to give up my child, the people who had thrown me a few $100s like I was a beggar. They had not just disowned me. They were not just cruel. They were murderers. They had tried to kill the one man who had, in the end, saved me and my daughter. The hypocrisy, the sheer profound evil of it was a black hole. I did not sleep. I sat in that chair all night, in the dark, watching the gray, ghostly shapes of the waves crash against the cliff. I thought about walking into the nearest police station. I thought about giving the file to the press, the way they had given my story to the press. Conspiracy to commit murder. Dozens of financial crimes. It would not just ruin them. It would put them in prison for the rest of their lives. It would be justice. It would be what they deserved. But it would be my hand. My choice. Roman's final test. The sun began to rise. A thin, gray, watery light filled the room, making the dark wood of the study look cold and dead. I felt 1,000 years old. I stood up, my joints stiff. I picked up the letter. I picked up the dossier. Across the room, disguised as a wood-paneled section of the bookshelf, was Roman's personal safe. Nina had shown me the combination, my new combination. I walked over. I spun the dial. The heavy steel door swung open with a quiet thud. I placed the envelope, the letter, and the dossier inside. I closed the door. I spun the dial, locking it. The sound of the tumblers clicking into place was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I turned back to the window. The gray light was hitting my face. I whispered to the empty room, to the ghost of the man who had given me this terrible, terrible power. I don't know whose daughter I am anymore. Elliot's and Diane's, or the man in the grave out there. I had been the mistress of Lockhart Cliff Estate for exactly 3 days. 3 days of existing in a surreal, quiet bubble. Lena was recovering, her laugh echoing in the vast halls. I was reading. I had started with the company's annual reports, trying to understand the sheer scale of the empire Roman had dropped in my lap. I was in the library, a first edition copy of a logistics manual in my hand, when I heard the noise. It was not a subtle noise. It was the sound of chaos. A woman's voice, high and sharp, shouting my name from the grand foyer. Where is she? Get that homeless gold digger down here now. I put the book down. I walked out of the library and stood at the top of the grand staircase. Below me was a hurricane. A woman who I knew instantly was Serena Lockhart had burst into the house. She was in her late 30s or early 40s, rail-thin, dressed in a blood-red designer suit that probably cost more than my old car. Her blonde hair was a perfect sharp bob. Her eyes were ice-cold, bloodshot, and glittering with a rage so pure it was almost impressive. She smelled faintly, even from the top of the stairs, of expensive gin. She was flanked by 2 men in suits, her lawyers, and a beefy man in a blazer who was clearly a bodyguard. Nina was standing in front of them, her body rigid, her face pale but composed, trying to block their path. Miss Lockhart, you cannot just... I can do whatever I want. Serena shrieked, spotting me. Her manicured, scarlet-painted fingers shot out and pointed. You, what is this sick, twisted joke? She stormed to the bottom of the staircase, her lawyers trailing uncomfortably behind her. She threw a sheath of papers onto the marble floor, a copy of the will. My father was a dying man. He was addled on morphine. He was not in his right mind. And you pathetic little bankrupt nothing. You slithered in here while he was dying, and you manipulated him. I descended the stairs slowly, one step at a time. I was not the woman from the SUV. I was not the woman who had begged her father for scraps. I was wearing Roman's protection, his name, his house. I felt a cold, hard, calm settle over me. A calm I hadn't felt since the day I'd been served. "Miss Lockhart," I said, my voice even echoing in the cavernous space. "Your father was not addled. He was lucid. He was perfectly, painfully clear about his decisions." "Clear." She laughed. A high, ugly sound. "He left his entire life to a vagrant, a failed CEO, a tech thief. You took advantage of a sick old man's delusion about some ancient, imaginary debt." "It was not imaginary," I said, reaching the bottom step. "And it was not a delusion. I am sorry for your loss, Serena, but I am not sorry for his choice. He was a brilliant man, and he was my friend." "Friend," she spat. "You were his bedside parasite. I will see you in hell. No, I will see you back in your car. This will not stand. We are contesting. We are going to ruin you again." We? I asked, looking at her lawyers, who were visibly sweating. "We are going to prove in a court of law that a man I had known for less than a week was coerced into changing a will he had spent 30 years writing. We're going to claim he was mentally incompetent." Serena smiled, a thin, cruel slash of red lipstick. "Oh no, sweetie. We're not just going to claim it. We're going to prove it, and we're going to use you to do it." Who would a judge believe was a master manipulator? A billionaire's daughter, or a homeless woman famous for fraud who suddenly inherits everything? She turned on her impossibly high heel. "You have 24 hours to get your things and your diseased child out of my father's house." "It's not your father's house anymore, Miss Lockhart," I said, my voice stopping her. "It's mine, and you are trespassing. Nina, please have security show Miss Lockhart and her associates out." Serena's face went from white to a deep, mottled purple. The bodyguard took a step forward, but Nina had already pressed a silent button on the wall. Two larger, more competent-looking men in quiet, dark suits emerged from the back hall. Serena looked at me, her eyes no longer just angry, but filled with a cold, reptilian promise. "This is not over. This is not even the beginning." She turned and stormed out, her lawyers scurrying to gather the papers she had thrown. The next morning, the war began. It was not a quiet legal proceeding. It was a media atom bomb. Serena, it turned out, had not just gone to her lawyers. She had gone to the press. I woke up to find my face was once again the lead story on every news site. The billionaires nobody knew, from disgraced CEO to Cinderella or Black Widow. Serena Lockhart, daughter of late Titan Roman Lockhart, files explosive lawsuit. The articles were brutal. They were masterpieces of insinuation. They painted me as a cunning, sociopathic grifter. They rehashed every lie, every fabricated piece of evidence from the Sentinel Vault case, presenting it as established fact. They said I had stalked the dying billionaire, wormed my way into his confidence, and used my known skills in deception to convince a senile old man to disinherit his only child. My old life, the one I had just begun to escape, was back. My awful, pale, deer-in-the-headlights courthouse photo was plastered everywhere. This time it was set in a split screen. On one side, me, the tech thief, looking ruined. On the other side, a long-lens aerial shot of the magnificent, sprawling Lockhart Cliff estate. The implication was clear. I had stolen this, too. The hashtag was trending on every platform by noon. Hashtag Lockhart Heist. Serena had filed the lawsuit officially. She was contesting the will on the grounds of undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. She was demanding the will be thrown out and a previous version, one that presumably left her everything, be reinstated. Harvey Cole called me. His voice was not dry and lawyerly. It was furious. "She's a fool," he snapped. "A spoiled, short-sighted fool. This is not just an attack on you, Miss Sanchez. It is an attack on Roman's memory, and we will treat it as such." The probate court hearing became the hottest ticket in the state. The media frenzy was so intense, they had to move it to a larger courtroom. When I arrived, walking beside Harvey, I had to push through a wall of cameras of reporters shouting my name, shouting questions. "Ariana, did you manipulate him? Are you a gold digger? How does it feel to steal a dying man's money?" I kept my head up. I wore the same black suit, I had worn to the funeral. I kept my eyes fixed on the courthouse doors. Inside, the room was packed. Serena was already there in the front row, dressed in somber, expensive black, a veil partially covering her face. She was playing the part of the grieving, wronged daughter. She looked at me as I passed, and she smiled. Her lawyers were sharks. They started by painting a picture of Roman in his last days, a man ravaged by cancer, isolated, weak, and pumped full of narcotics. Then they painted their picture of me. They called my former CFO to the stand, a man who had turned on me to save his own skin. He testified again about the irregularities at Sentinel Vault. They submitted the headlines, the articles, the judgment from the Helix Fortress case. This woman, Ariana Sanchez, Serena's lead attorney, thundered, is a proven fraud, a manipulator of code, of finance, of people. And now you expect this court to believe that she, a destitute vagrant, just happened to stumble upon a dying billionaire, and he just happened to give her his entire fortune out of the goodness of his heart? It is an insult to the intelligence of this court. Harvey Cole and his team were methodical. They were precise. They were, as Roman had been, efficient. They called Dr. Albescu to the stand. Doctor, Harvey asked, in your professional medical opinion, in the week leading up to his death, was Mr. Roman Lockhart of sound mind? He was, the doctor said, his voice firm. He was weak, yes. In pain, yes. But his mind was formidable, sharp as a scalpel until the very last hours. He refused most of the painkillers, in fact. He said he had work to do and needed a clear head. And did you at any point witness Miss Sanchez pressuring or threatening or manipulating Mr. Lockhart? No. In fact, I mostly witnessed her sitting by his bed reading to him. Logistics manuals. Mostly, he seemed to be teaching her. Then Harvey played his trump card. The court has already reviewed Mr. Lockhart's medical files, his psychiatric evaluations, all of which confirm his lucidity. But we have something more. A video deposition made by Mr. Lockhart, with me and his physician present, 3 days before he signed the final will. We would like to play it for the court. Serena, for the first time, looked startled. The lights dimmed, a large screen was lowered, and there was Roman. He was in his hospital bed, looking frail. His voice a whisper, but his eyes were burning. I am making this recording because I know my daughter, he rasped to the camera. I know she's a creature of entitlement. She will try to paint me as a fool. She will try to paint the new inheritor as a villain. He looked directly into the camera, as if he were staring at the judge, at Serena, at me. Let me be unequivocally clear. I am in my right mind, and I am disinheriting Serena Lockhart, not out of spite, but out of necessity. She would run my company, my life's work, into the ground in 6 months. She's a black hole of want. I'm leaving my company to Ariana Sanchez, a woman I have met only once, but a woman who saved my life for nothing. A woman who, when faced with her own ruin, did not break. She is a builder. She has been, as he put it, tested by fire. I'm not giving her a gift. I'm giving her a burden, because she is the only one who can carry it. This is my wish. This is my will. And so help me God, it will be done. The video ended. The lights came up. The courtroom was tomb silent. Serena was staring at the blank screen, her face ashen. Her lawyer, for the first time, looked defeated. But it was not over. I had to testify. Serena's lawyer tried to tear me apart. He brought up the Sentinel lawsuit. He brought up the bankruptcy. He brought up the fact that I was sleeping in my car. So, you were desperate, Miss Sanchez. You were a woman with nothing, a mother with a sick child and no way to care for her. Would you not, in that moment, do anything to save yourself? No, I said, my voice quiet, but it carried in the silent room. But I would do anything to save my daughter, including, perhaps, manipulating a dying man. Mr. Lockhart was not the man I went to for help, I said, looking at the judge. I was in the parking lot of St. Jude's. They had just turned my 7-year-old daughter, who had a fever of 104 and pneumonia, away from the emergency room. Because my debit card was declined, I was at the absolute bottom of my life. I had no one. That is when Mr. Lockhart's people found me. I told the story. The highway, the fire, the night and the storm. I did not know who Roman Lockhart was when I pulled him from that car. He was just a man. He was not a billionaire. When he found me, I was just a woman. I was not a CEO. I was a mother praying in a parking lot. He did not give me his fortune because I manipulated him. He gave it to me because he saw himself in me. He saw someone who had been framed, who had been attacked, and who was still, somehow, fighting. I finished. The judge, an older woman with a famously stern reputation, was looking at me, her expression unreadable. The verdict came 2 days later. The judge did not mince words. The evidence presented by the plaintiff, Miss Lockhart, has been speculative and emotional. The evidence presented by the defense has been factual and overwhelming. Mr. Roman Lockhart was, by all accounts, of sound and disposing mind. His video testimony is one of the clearest statements of intent this court has ever seen. The will is valid. The inheritance will proceed as written. Miss Ariana Sanchez is the legal and rightful heir to the Lockhart estate and the controlling interest in Lockhart Transit Group. Case dismissed. It was over. I had won. Again, the media swarmed me. But this time, the tone was different. I was not the villain. I was the victim, the wronged woman, the Cinderella. Harvey Cole steered me through the crowd and into the waiting Bentley. As the car pulled away, I looked back. Serena was standing on the courthouse steps, alone. Her lawyers had already hurried away. The reporters had abandoned her for me. She was staring at my car. The black veil was gone. Her face was naked, and it was not sad. It was not angry. It was a mask of pure, cold, patient hatred. She had lost the battle, but her eyes told me with absolute certainty that she was just beginning to plan the war. The victory in probate court was not a celebration. It was a starting gun. The media's Cinderella narrative was just as suffocating as the Black Widow one, and just as false. I was not a princess in a castle. I was the new chairwoman of a multi-billion-dollar logistics empire, and I was in over my head. I dove into the work. It was the only thing I knew. I set up my new life. Lena was enrolled in a small, excellent private school on the coast under a slightly different name. Nina, who had become my fierce, unwavering right hand, managed the estate. And I went to the office, the real office, the gleaming steel and glass tower of Lockhart Transit Group in downtown San Francisco. I worked 18-hour days. I read every report from the last 5 years. I met with the board, a collection of stony-faced men who had been loyal to Roman, but were deeply skeptical of me. They were polite. They called me Miss Sanchez, but they were waiting for me to fail. They were waiting for Serena's spoiled, incompetent caricature to show up. They got me, the CEO who had built a company from a PowerPoint deck, the woman who knew what it was to lose everything. I began drafting the plans, a new ethical framework, a complete overhaul of the company's opaque political lobbying division, a reinvestment in green transport. I was trying to build what Roman had wanted, an empire with a conscience. But the work, the grinding, glorious work, was just a distraction. The real work was back at the estate in the safe. Every night, I would come home. I would kiss Lena goodnight, her room warm and safe, a million miles from the back of an SUV. And then I would walk down the hall. I would stand in front of Roman's study. I would go inside. The smell of old books and his faint, lingering scent of pipe tobacco still in the air. I would stand in front of the wood-paneled wall. My hand would hover over the hidden latch. Inside, the file waited. Carter, Sterling Holdings. Elliot, Diane. Justice or forgiveness. The choice was a physical weight, a cold stone in my gut. I was paralyzed. To hand it over was to execute my own parents, the people who had despised and disowned me. To keep it hidden was to be complicit in their crime, to fail the man who had given me this second life. I never opened the safe. I would stand there, my hand shaking, and then I would turn and walk away. I was a coward. I was the owner of everything, and I was a prisoner of that file. It had been 2 months since the trial. I had just survived my first quarterly shareholder meeting. It was a brutal affair. I had presented my new ethical framework. The old guard pushed back hard. They were worried about profit margins, not my conscience. I had fought them, and in the end, we had a stalemate. I returned to the estate late. It was after midnight. The house was silent, the long drive through the fog doing nothing to ease the pounding in my head. I was exhausted, my heels clicking too loudly on the polished marble of the grand foyer. And I stopped. A draft. I never felt drafts in this house. It was sealed like a bank vault. The draft was coming from the hallway, from Roman's study. The door, which I always kept shut, was open, just a crack. A thin sliver of yellow light sliced across the dark floor. And then I smelled it. Faint, acidic, and utterly wrong. Cigarette smoke. Nina ran this house with military precision. No one smoked. Not ever. My blood turned to ice. I didn't call for security. I didn't think. I moved. I pushed the heavy door. It swung open silently. The banker's lamp on the desk was on, but it was flickering, the bulb loose, casting strange, dancing shadows. The room was a disaster. It had been ransacked. The antique desk drawers were ripped out, their contents, old maps, pens, corporate ledgers, dumped in a pile on the priceless Persian rug. The tall, heavy filing cabinets in the corner, where Roman kept his old physical archives, had been pried open. The metal was bent. The locks snapped and broken. Someone had been searching for something. But I knew they were not just searching. I ran. I didn't even look at the mess. I ran to the wood-paneled wall. It looked untouched. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely press the hidden latch. The panel clicked, but it didn't swing open. It was stuck. I pulled at it, my nails scraping the wood. And then I saw it. It was not a clumsy, amateur job. This was professional. This was surgical. Right in the center of the wood panel, where the high-security steel door was hidden behind it, was a small, perfectly round hole, about 2 inches in diameter. It was melted, the edges scorched. The wood blackened. They had used a drill or a torch. They had destroyed the tumblers. I pulled again, this time with all my strength. The broken mechanism gave way, and the heavy door swung open with a groan. The safe was empty. No, not empty. My new passport, which Harvey had arranged, was there. A stack of emergency cash Roman kept was there. But the one thing, the only thing, the thick, cream-colored envelope, the dossier, the letters sealed in red wax, it was gone. A sound, a choked, terrified gasp, came from the doorway. I spun around. Nina was standing there, her hand over her mouth, her face a mask of pure horror. She was in her robe, her hair undone. "Ma'am," she whispered. "Oh, God, Miss Sanchez, who is in this house?" I demanded, my voice a low, dangerous growl I didn't recognize. And then Nina's composure, the one thing I'd come to rely on, shattered. She collapsed, not onto the floor, but against the door frame, her body racked with sobs. I'm so sorry. She wept, her voice muffled by her hands. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know." I tried to stop her. "Stop who?" I said, grabbing her arm. "Nina, stop who?" "Miss Lockhart." She choked out. "Serena. She came this afternoon." Nina rushed on, the words tumbling out. "Serena. She had papers. A court order. It looked official. It had the judge's signature from the probate case. It said she had the right to retrieve personal items and to collect any documents that might pertain to Miss Sanchez's fitness and competence to run the company. She said it was part of her appeal. "There is no appeal," I said, the cold dread making me numb. "I know." I told her. But she brought her own security guards. Did they just push me aside? I called Mr. Cole. But she threatened to have me arrested for obstruction of a court order. Nina was shaking violently. She went in here, into the study. She told her guards to wait outside the door. She locked it. She was in here for an hour, at least. I heard a sound. A strange sound. A high whirring sound. I thought it was a fax machine or, I don't know, a drill. A drill, I whispered. Nina continued, not hearing me. She was calm. So calm. She lit a cigarette right here on the marble. She looked at me, and she smiled. I will never forget that smile. Nina's eyes met mine, filled with terror and shame. She said, "This place isn't my father's temple anymore, Miss Morales. It's a battlefield." And then she left. She wasn't looking for a file. "Nina," I said, my voice hollow. I walked over to the violated safe. She was retrieving a weapon. She knew. She must have known her father. She must have guessed that he, a paranoid and meticulous man, would have kept the proof. and she had used the chaos of the probate case to come and get it. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I had security, real security, flown in. The estate was locked down. Harvey Cole was apoplectic, filing injunctions, talking to the judge, but we both knew it was too late. The package was out. The bomb was ticking. I waited for the blackmail call, for the demand. Give me the company or this file goes public. But the call never came. Serena was smarter than that. She did not want money. She wanted me. On the 4th morning, I was in the breakfast nook. It was the one bright, normal room in the house. I was trying to teach Lena how to make pancakes, trying to pretend our world was not about to end. We were laughing. I had just flipped a pancake, and it had landed on the floor. The small television on the counter was on, muted, playing a local morning show. And then the red banner flashed across the bottom of the screen. Breaking news. The pancake, the laughter, it all died in my throat. I grabbed the remote and unmuted it. We are live in Northgate Hills, a reporter said, her voice sharp with excitement, the wind whipping her hair. The camera panned. It was my parents' house. The stone columns. The iron gates. But now the gates were wide open, and the circular drive was filled with black and white police cars. Ariana, what's? Lena started to ask. Hush, baby. The camera zoomed in. A shaky handheld shot. The massive oak doors opened. My father, Elliot Carter, emerged. He was in his silk dressing gown, his silver hair a mess. He was not in charge. His hands were behind his back. They were in handcuffs. A detective was pushing my father down the steps. Mr. Carter, any comment? The reporter screamed. He looked up, his face ashen, confused, utterly broken. He looked for the first time in his life small. Then, my mother, Diane Carter. She came out, flanked by a lawyer, her hand held up to shield her face from the flashing cameras. Elliot and Diane Carter. The anchor's voiceover said, grave and serious, arrested just moments ago on a 20-count indictment. The charges are staggering. Conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, corporate sabotage. Lena, I said, my voice a dead thing. Go find Nina. Go play in a library now. But Mama, now Lena. She ran, terrified. I stood there, my hand gripping the marble counter, as the anchor continued. The charges, we are told, stem from a 12-year-old cold case. The attempted murder of transport billionaire Roman Lockhart. My blood, it did not run cold. It just stopped. The Redwood Valley District Attorney's Office, the anchor read from her paper, is saying this arrest comes after they received a mountain of irrefutable evidence. Contracts, wire transfers, and surveillance photos. The DA confirms the evidence was provided to them by the victim's own daughter, Miss Serena Lockhart. There it was. She had done it. She had not blackmailed me. She had not leaked it to the press. She had done something so much more brilliant, so much more cruel. She had not just given the file to the DA, she had gift-wrapped it. She had presented herself as the grieving daughter, finally getting justice for her murdered father. And in doing so, she had not just destroyed my parents. She had destroyed me. My phone, the one on the counter, began to light up. Then the house line. Then my cell. The media. The narrative. The one I had just begun to control shattered. The Cinderella story was dead. The new story was already writing itself. I could hear the talking heads in my mind. The Lockhart heiress, daughter of the killers. The Carter-Lockhart connection. A bloody, twisted legacy. Did Ariana Sanchez know? Was the inheritance a payoff? Was her entire rags-to-riches story a lie? A cover-up for her family's unspeakable crime? Serena had not just used the file, she had planted it like a bomb in the one place that would hurt me the most. She had made me, in the eyes of the world, the infamous daughter of the very people who had tried to kill my savior. I walked out of the kitchen. I walked like a sleepwalker back to Roman's study. I stood at the large window, staring out at the cold, gray ocean. The safe was behind me, repaired but empty. Roman had given me a choice, justice or forgiveness, a moral test, and I had hesitated. I had failed, and now the choice was gone. Serena had made the choice for me, not for justice, not for righteousness. She had done it for pure, cold, perfect revenge, and she had just in one clean, surgical move checkmated me. The trial of Elliot and Diane Carter was the biggest media event of the decade. They called it the Billionaire's Gambit trial. It was a circus of pinstripe lawyers, satellite news trucks, and a public hungry for the downfall of the 1%. I was there every day. I did not sit with the family, if you could even call them that. There were no other Carters who would claim them. I sat in the very last row of the public gallery, hidden behind dark sunglasses and a simple black scarf. My hair pulled back. I was a ghost in the courtroom, watching the ghosts of my past be dissected. The prosecution, armed with Roman's perfect, meticulous file, was brutal. They laid it all out. The strategic partnership agreement. The wire transfers from the Cayman Islands, $2 million. The email from my father's right-hand man. It is time for a permanent solution. Each piece of evidence was a hammer blow, shattering the polished facade of Carter Sterling Holdings. The lead prosecutor, a woman with a sharp, clear voice, wove a story of cold, calculated greed. She showed how my parents' firm was on the verge of a hostile takeover of Lockhart Transit, and how Roman's refusal to sell had led them to this permanent solution. My father's defense was predictable. His lawyers, the best money could buy, tried to paint him as a victim, a man duped by his partners, who were now conveniently dead or had vanished. They argued the wire transfers were for legitimate consulting, and the email was taken out of context. My father sat there impassive, his face a stony mask, but I could see the panic in his eyes, the slight, constant tremor in his left hand. My mother's defense was different. She did not try to fight the facts. She played the part of the ignorant wife. She cried. She wore simple, modest clothes, and when she was on the stand, she looked at me. It was the first time she had made eye contact with me since I was Ariana Sanchez, CEO. She did not look at the jury or the judge. She looked at the back row, at the shadow she knew was me. In her eyes, they were not defiant. They were not angry. They were begging. She was, in her silent, theatrical way, pleading with me. Save us. You are our daughter. Stop this. I put my hand to my mouth, my whole body rigid. I did not look away. I made her hold my gaze. I gave her nothing. That night, back at the estate, I felt nothing. Not pity, not rage, just a vast, cold emptiness. The email arrived at 2 in the morning. It was from an encrypted, anonymous server. The sender was friend. The subject line was a path to peace. My blood ran cold. I opened it. It was not a long message. It was a scan, a single-page document. It was a legal agreement, a settlement and transfer of assets. It proposed that I, Ariana Sanchez, in recognition of the emotional distress and familial conflict, would voluntarily transfer my 60% controlling interest in Lockhart Transit Group to a neutral third-party trust, a trust whose beneficiary was not named, but whose administrator was a firm I had never heard of. In return, friend would permanently sequester all evidence and correspondence related to the ongoing Carter trial and would ensure that certain sensitive personal letters were never made public. It was blackmail, and, while attached to the email, was the leverage. A second scanned image. It was Roman's letter to me, the letter from the safe. Serena had not given the DA everything. She had kept the most personal, most damning piece for herself. I'm giving this file to you. Let the person who is wrong decide, justice or forgiveness. The email had no text. It did not need it. The threat was crystal clear. Serena had a copy of Roman's letter. She could and would leak it. She would not just prove that I had known about my parents' guilt. She would prove that I had hidden it, that I had hesitated, that I had sat on the evidence, the key to a murder investigation for months. I would not just be the daughter of the killers. I would be their co-conspirator. I would be indicted for obstruction of justice. The board of Lockhart Transit would oust me before I could even call a lawyer. I would lose the company. I would lose my reputation. I might even lose Lena. I looked at the scan document. This was Serena's true game. She did not just want revenge. She wanted it all. She wanted to destroy my parents with one hand and use that destruction to blackmail me into giving her the company with clean hands. She had turned me into a moral hostage. I sat there in Roman's study, the same room where I had first read that letter. I thought about his words. I remembered sitting by his bed, listening to him talk about ethics. It's not about feeling good, Ariana, he had rasped, his voice a dry whisper. That's for children. Real ethics. They are ugly decisions. They're about choosing the least wrong path, the one you can live with. It's a choice of burdens. Serena was offering me a burden. Live with the shame and silence, but keep my life. But there was another path, the one he had chosen, the one where you fight back. I was not going to negotiate in the dark. The next day, I made a call. Serena, I said, my voice bright and unsteady when she picked up. It's Ariana. I know we've had our differences, but this trial, it's destroying everything. I think we need to talk about reconciliation for the good of the company. She was silent. I could almost hear her smiling. I think you're right, Ariana, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. We should, for my father's memory. My office, I said. Lockhart Tower. Tomorrow. 4 p.m. Just us. I'll be there, she said, and hung up. I called Harvey Cole. I called 2 members of the Lockhart board, the 2 I trusted, the 2 who had been with Roman for 30 years. I'm asking you to come to a meeting tomorrow, I told them. You will be in my adjoining private office, and the door will be open a crack. You will not speak. You will not be seen. You will just observe. At 3:05 p.m. the next day, I was in my office, the one that used to be Roman's, the one on the top floor. The digital audio recorder in my pocket was on. The door to my private study, where Harvey and the 2 board members were hiding, was open just enough. Serena walked in at 4 p.m. on the dot. She looked triumphant. She was wearing a cream-colored suit. She looked like the new CEO. Ariana, she said, her smile wide and predatory. This is civilized. I'm impressed. Serena, I said, gesturing to a chair. Thank you for coming. I got your email. Her smile did not waver. The path to peace. I'm glad you're considering it. It's a very generous offer. I think a way for you to step away from all this ugliness. Keep your daughter. Keep your freedom. All you have to do is sign. You broke into my house, I said, my voice quiet. I retrieved what was mine, she snapped, the facade cracking. My father's justice. Something you were too weak, too compromised to deliver. You, the daughter of his killers, sitting on his throne. She laughed. It was a joke. So you stole the file from a private safe. I took it, she said, her voice rising. All pretense gone. She was boasting. I got a court order for personal effects, and I used a plasma cutter on his safe. It was beautiful. He would have been proud of the initiative. And I found everything. And you gave it to the DA. I gave him the file on your monstrous parents, yes. Justice for Roman. But I kept the best part. I kept the letter. Your little moral dilemma. The proof that you were just as guilty as they are. That you sat there hiding evidence of an attempted murder for months. She leaned forward, her eyes glittering. So, yes, you will sign the paper. You will give me back my father's company, and you will disappear. Or I will send that letter to the DA, to the press, and to your new board of directors. You will be indicted for obstruction. You will be ruined again. And this time, there will be no billionaire to save you. Thank you, Serena, I said, standing up. That's all I needed to hear. What? Mr. Cole. I called. The door to the study opened. Harvey Cole walked out, followed by the 2 stone-faced board members. Serena's face. It was a painting of destruction. The color drained from it. The smile. The triumph. It all collapsed. You, she whispered. I have your full confession on digital audio, I said, pulling the recorder from my pocket. Breaking and entering. Evidence tampering. Blackmail. Extortion. But you know what, Serena? That's not even the best part. Harvey stepped forward and placed a different, much thicker file on the desk. What? What is that? Serena stammered. This, I said, is what I've been doing for the last 2 months while you've been playing spy. This is the other file. The one you didn't know about. The one I found when I took control of the company. The one that shows every illegal transfer you and the CFO, Gareth, made while your father was on his deathbed. The $30 million you siphoned to an offshore account in your mother's name. The consulting fees you paid yourself. The siphoning, the corporate fraud. That's what I've been working on. An emergency board meeting was called for the next morning. The press was in a frenzy outside the building, sensing blood. I stood before the full board. I'm not here to make excuses, I said, my voice clear. Miss Lockhart's claims about my hesitation are true. I was given a terrible choice, and I failed to act. I have already provided my full, sworn testimony to the district attorney's office about Roman's letter and my own failure. And I am resigning. A gasp went through the room. I am resigning my position as controlling chairwoman. I am voluntarily dissolving the 60% voting block Roman gave me. I am ceding that control to this board, to be placed in an independent external trust. The power Roman gave me. I will not have it be a poison. This company will be governed by a board, not by a single flawed individual, not by me. Then I laid out the case against Serena, the recording, the financial audit. When I was done, Serena was called in. She was questioned. She was confronted with the audio with the bank statements. She looked to her one ally, the CFO Gareth. Gareth, a small man I'd always seen sweating, looked at the board, looked at Serena, and he cracked. He confessed everything. The fallout was immediate. The DA, armed with my new testimony, opened a new, second investigation. This one into Serena Lockhart. At my parents' trial, I was called back to the stand. Not as a ghost, not as a spectator, as a witness for the prosecution. The DA asked me, "Miss Sanchez, did you know your parents were responsible for the attempted murder of Roman Lockhart?" I looked out. I saw them. My father, his face granite. My mother, her hands clasped, weeping silently. I said. I have known for months. I knew, and I did nothing. I was a coward. I was torn between the family that abandoned me and the man who saved me. And my hesitation was a mistake. A mistake I am here to correct. I told the court everything. The safe, the letter, the blackmail. My parents watched me, and in their eyes, I saw the final, terrible understanding. They had raised me in a world of cold, hard transactions. They had cut me off. They had shown me no mercy. And in that moment, they finally understood. They had left me with absolutely no reason to show them any mercy in return. The verdicts came in a single, brutal week. Elliot and Diane Carter, guilty, conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, RICO violations. They were sentenced to 25 years to life. I watched them be led away. My mother's last desperate look aimed right at me. I held it. I did not look away. And Serena, as I was leaving the courtroom after my parents' sentencing, I saw a commotion at the end of the hall. Serena, her face a mask of disbelief. Two detectives were standing in front of her. One of them was reading her rights. "Serena Lockhart, you are under arrest for extortion, blackmail, conspiracy to commit fraud, and breaking and entering." I heard the sharp, final click of the handcuffs. She saw me across the hall. She saw me. Her face, no longer hateful, was just empty. She had lost. She had lost it all. I walked out of the courthouse. The rain was beginning to fall. A soft, cleansing drizzle. Lena was waiting for me, her small hand finding mine. Nina was beside her, holding a black umbrella. The media swarmed, a wall of cameras and microphones. Ariana, do you regret it? Do you regret sending your parents to prison?" I stopped. I turned. I faced the one reporter who had shouted, his camera light a blinding, accusatory star. I looked right into the lens. "I regret being silent for so long," I said, my voice clear, carrying over the rain. "Mr. Lockhart's didn't destroy my family. It just illuminated what they had already done. The rest was my choice. And today, I chose justice. I turned away from them. I turned to my daughter. I knelt, so I was eye to eye with her. The noise of the press, the world, it all faded away. We start over from here," I whispered, brushing the damp hair from her face. But this time, Lena, no more secrets. She nodded, her eyes serious. And then she smiled. I took her hand and we walked, just the two of us, away from the courthouse into the rain. A new chapter, a chapter built not on blood or on money, but on a truth I had almost died to earn. What would you have done if you found a secret like mine? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.